Hello and welcome to the Quick News Daily Podcast, where I give you the facts first, no clickbait stories, just real news that matters to real people. Today is Tuesday, September 15th, and thank you for joining me. Man, do we have a lot to get to today.
Hats, coats, galoshes over here. But hurry, please. We have so much time and so little to see. Wait a minute. Strike that. Reverse it. Thank you.
So let's get caught up. So, this was another big story from over the weekend. It was the announcement by Mike Bloomberg that he's going to spend at least $100 million in the state of Florida to help Joe Biden win the state. This Washington Post story says that Bloomberg made the decision last week after seeing those numbers on Florida and seeing that, maybe Biden's a little underperforming there. It's a little closer than we thought. The official quote is, "Voting starts on September 24th in Florida, so the need to inject real capital in that state quickly is an urgent need." This is Bloomberg advisor Kevin Sheekey. He continues, "Mike believes that by investing in Florida, it will allow campaign resources and other Democratic resources to be used in other states, in particular, the state of Pennsylvania." So there was always this fear of, where's Bloomberg's money? He got to speak at the convention, but he's not going to fork any over, even after he said he made this promise to keep his campaign staff employed and, put all this money in to help beat Trump. Personally, I was really never worried. Biden didn't really come after Mike too personally, at least for too long. Also, because they were both from New York, I'm sure Trump gave Bloomberg his fair share of grief during the couple of terms that Mike was the mayor of New York City. You can tell when Bloomberg speaks, whenever he goes on TV, his ads were also pretty devastating, but you can just feel the vitriol, the contempt he has for Donald Trump. Mike Bloomberg is obviously a big money guy. He's a billionaire, but even he trusts Joe Biden more than Donald Trump. So that should really be a warning to everyone. And as Rick Wilson always says, Mike Bloomberg has more money in his couch cushions than Donald Trump has at all. I think alluding to the fact that Donald has some shady loans. And he's probably not even a billionaire, really, when you get down to it. Off topic, but thank goodness that is a breath of fresh air. Some good news for Joe Biden on the money side to go with an even better August. And by the way, the Biden campaign pointed out that since Calvin Coolidge in 1924, no Republican has won if they don't win Florida. And this year it really is all about Florida, because if Trump doesn't get that one, then he's got to pick up a couple from either Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and those are looking shaky. That's really, really generous because he's behind in all of them. So he needs Florida to have any chance. And that's a little note to yourself if you're watching on election night or as the votes come in the days after in the mail. Well, we're going to know pretty quickly because Florida starts counting theirs early. So we'll know on election night mostly what the vote is going to be. So if Florida starts going Biden, we're going to be in really good shape. That's when you know, okay, we might have this one. In follow-up to a story we started last week, the Supreme Court right here in my own backyard, the Wisconsin Supreme Court, decided to keep the Green Party candidate off the presidential ballot, meaning that the absentee ballots can be mailed out in time. The 4-3 decision, which is closer than it should have been, means that Green Party candidate Howie Hawkins will not be on the ballot this time, which is good for two reasons. One, obviously, the absentee ballots get mailed out on time. Voters have more time to mail them back. But also, now there's one less person to split the vote among Trump and Biden. That was the whole story about 2016. There were enough third-party votes overall to make up the difference between Trump and Clinton. So, obviously, we were all a little bit worried, well, more than a little bit probably, that something similar would happen this year and that Trump would win again because people didn't want either of them. So this helps in those two big ways. It was 3 of the liberal justices and then 1 conservative justice dissented and went with the liberals. So it was 4-3. Again, much closer than it should have been. Now, we all remember the big Tik Tok scare of a couple weeks ago, don't we? Yes, back in August, Trump was talking about banning Tik Tok because it's owned by a Chinese company. The rumor and the buzz at that time was that it was actually going to be Microsoft who would buy at least some portion of Tik Tok, maybe just for US operations, but it wasn't really clear how that was going to work. Well, it seems that at the last minute here, Microsoft is out and Oracle is in. It's not set in stone yet, but some people familiar with the negotiations say that this deal would actually look more like what TikTok has wanted all along, which is that Oracle could take a stake in a newly formed US TikTok business while serving as a tech partner and housing TikTok's American user data on its servers. That's according to Bloomberg. Ironic. So that's the whole point of contention here. That data, where is it stored, what can they do with it? Obviously, with Mr. Look at me, I'm tough on China, Trump, he wants the data here. And he and Mike Pompeo are all spreading the, well, what are they doing? They can watch you at any time. They're watching you right now. They're listening to you record this podcast. It's just all... it's almost to the point where I don't want to criticize TikTok anymore because it just feels so racist. It's just so anti-Chinese. At the same time, it is more towards the Chinese Communist Party, but as with all things Trump, it's taken a little bit to the extreme and is getting into the territory where it's more all Chinese people are bad. So we can't have our data over there because they're bad people. But yeah, shockingly, it is Oracle, not Microsoft, who might be swooping in for the TikTok deal. The reason I called today's show Bloomberg was because that seems to really be the theme of the day. This next story also comes courtesy of Bloomberg and their investigative team, and it's about a major development in the QAnon saga. Now, QAnon is the Pizzagate, Hillary Clinton, pedophile sex ring, BS lies, and all those conspiracy theories where Donald Trump is fighting the deep state and he was sent by God himself, or whatever it was. Well, a website titled qmap.pub was recently taken down after Bloomberg's investigative team located its owner and finally found out the identity of the owner. So qmap.pub, it's under the umbrella of QAnon. It's the online name of QMap's creator. And they have their own Patreon account, so they're accepting donations as well. I would not recommend contributing to that one. But in March, they said that they were going to release an Android app titled Armor of God, which would be a social network for all these QAnon followers. The app developer's email address was then listed on Google Play's page, so like where they could download the app. And through that, Bloomberg's investigative team was able to trace it to New Jersey state business records and the parent company, Patriot Platforms LLC, matches the address of Jason Gelinas. So he ostensibly, and allegedly for legal reasons, is the owner of this app and of this website. Now, what's special about Jason Gelinas? Why would I spend so much time on this? Well, as it turns out, Mr. Gelinas is a senior vice president of a company. So that makes it a big deal, right? Oh, but hold on just 1 second. It's not just any company. It's Citigroup. That's right, Citigroup, who you might actually know from owning Citibank, one of the largest banks in the US. A senior vice president was allegedly in on this QAnon stuff. He believed in it enough that he made a website and an app for it. When they confronted him outside of his home to try to get a comment, he said, quote, "I'm not going to comment on any of that. I'm not going to get involved. I want to stay out of it." End quote. But this group, this investigative team, also reported that Gelinas was wearing an American flag baseball cap and offered a comment about the QAnon following, calling it, quote, "a patriotic movement to save the country." So, doubling down, really. I mean, I just don't get it. He could even try to deny that he was involved with the website or the app. Maybe he knew it was too rock solid of a case. But he could have tried to do that and say, like, I don't know anything about QAnon. I'm not going to comment. I don't know what's going on here. But no, he decides to double down, give his support for QAnon as an executive of Citigroup. So even if it turns out that he wasn't involved in the app or the website, unlikely, a Citigroup higher-up still voiced support for the same group that alleges that Hillary Clinton was running a child sex ring in the basement of a pizza parlor. Just think about that for 1 second. I don't know what else to call this except a very scary development in the trial of a COVID vaccine. So I think a couple weeks ago I mentioned that AstraZeneca had to briefly put their vaccine trial on pause because one person came down with a I forget what the exact term was, but they weren't quite sure what the source of the side effect was. Well, now they're releasing what the patient went through, and it does not sound great. So AstraZeneca, who's running this with Oxford University over in Britain, said the trial volunteer recovered from a severe inflammation of the spinal cord, but is no longer hospitalized. This is from an article on CNN. It goes on to say they have not confirmed that the patient was afflicted with transverse myelitis, but Dr. Avindra Nath, who has the title of Intramural Clinical Director and a leader of viral research at the National Institute for Neurological Disorders and Stroke, an NIH division, so National Institute of Health division. Again, don't ask those people where they work because you'll be there all day. So AstraZeneca didn't confirm this transverse myelitis, but Nath and another neurologist said they understood this to be the case. Transverse myelitis produces a set of symptoms involving inflammation along the spinal cord that can cause pain, muscle weakness, and, paralysis. All that said, Britain's version of the FDA, which is called the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, reviewed the case and has allowed the trial to resume over in the UK. However, our NIH is still investigating and seeing what we should do about the problem. These specialists say that there could be several causes for this myelitis. One is that vaccines often bring out previously undiscovered conditions that patients have. So the vaccine triggers an immune response, and sometimes when that immune response happens, it sort of, it causes a lot to happen within your body. So things that you might not have otherwise discovered come to the forefront. That's kind of the hope in this one. There was a patient who earlier had similar symptoms early on in the trial, but they found out that she had multiple sclerosis, so they chalked it up to that. But the second one, and they'll have to see if this person has any underlying health conditions, but they're worried that the second one could be more of what they call molecular mimicry, which is where some small piece of the vaccine may be similar to tissue in the brain or spinal cord, resulting in an immune attack on that tissue in response to the vaccine component. So if that's the case, this infectious disease specialist that they quote in the article says another occurrence of transverse myelitis would be likely if that trial resumed. And if this were to happen, a second case would shut down the trial. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. The thing to keep in mind is that this condition occurs at a rate of 1 in 250,000 people. So it's rare, and it, quote, strikes most often as a result of the body's immune response to a virus. Less frequently, such episodes have also been linked to vaccines. So, at least now we know a bit more about what that volunteer went through, what their symptoms were. It wasn't just like flu-like symptoms or something like that. It definitely does sound pretty serious, and man, who could have predicted that rushing through all these trials, except a lot of people? Now, obviously, we do have to wait for the final results to see if this was linked, but I don't know. Seems like a pretty big coincidence if it's not. Thinking back to when I mentioned that acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf was actually found to be installed illegally, like he's in the position illegally, a federal judge in Maryland has agreed with that decision from the Government Accountability Office. The ruling was actually issued last Friday, and the gist of it was that when the last Homeland Security Secretary, the last one who was actually nominated and a full-time secretary, Kirstjen Nielsen, you might remember her? So when she left, Kevin McAleenan took over on an acting basis, and he modified the order of succession, so like if he stepped down, who would take over, so that it would make sure that Wolf was the one who would take over, because Wolf is just like, basically he's been a lobbyist his entire career. He has no experience with Homeland Security, he's just there to, he's just a Trump lackey. So the first acting secretary's appointment was actually ruled invalid, and that was found to be because of the order of succession. So when he also modified the order of succession, that meant that Wolf's transition into the position was also invalid. So this guy who's talking about sending troops in everywhere and cracking down on protesters and loves the idea of throwing them in unmarked vans, yeah, he's there illegally himself. Now, that doesn't mean he's leaving, of course, because why would they do that? But the irony of you yourself being illegal and saying, oh, law and order this, law and order that, it's insane. It's too much. It's literally too much to handle. It's so Ah, the irony. It's almost as crazy as saying this.
I want my commander-in-chief to be able to calm under pressure. I want him to not exert hysteria to the American people and cause a panic. That doesn't mean he's not dealing with it sincerely or severely, but, that's the reality. Bob Woodward is a couple of weeks before an election. He's got to crank out another book. He was right once 40 years ago, and he's carried it that way ever since.
In case maybe you didn't recognize the voice, that was Donald Trump Jr. supposedly talking about Joe Biden. Like Joe Biden is the madman, the guy who is just in over his head. Just the projection of these people is incredible. Well, that's going to wrap it up for me here on this Tuesday. I think you guys know the drill by now. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening. That's number one. First and foremost, most important. Number two is leave a review. If the platform you're on lets you leave a review, because that really does help the show get out there, get more visibility, I would appreciate it there. Again, we do have merchandise available with the Quick News Daily logo on it. Everything from masks, shirts, fanny packs, long sleeve shirts. It's getting a little bit chillier up by me. Whatever you want, we have. Otherwise, as always, stay safe, make your plan to vote, fill out your census, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.